At a gentleman's club, Ani works as a dancer and forms friendships with her clients. However, when Diamond finds out that one of her regulars hired Ani instead of her, she gets upset. Despite this, Ani remains close with the other dancers, including Lulu. One night, the manager, Jimmy, asks Ani to meet a client who wants someone who speaks Russian. He introduces her to Ivan, who is immediately interested in her. Ivan tells Ani he's visiting from Russia, so she takes him to the VIP room to offer him an exclusive experience. The two spend the entire evening together, and Ani makes a strong impression on him. The next morning, after her shift, Ani leaves her glamorous work persona behind and goes home to live with her sister. Later that day, she receives a message from Ivan, inviting her to his house. She is amazed by his luxurious home while he stays in the living room. Ivan excitedly shows her to another room where they spend time together. Afterward, they talk, and Ani learns that Ivan is the son of a Russian oligarch. Feeling fortunate to have such a wealthy client, the next day Ani spends more time with Ivan at his house. He invites her to his New Year's Eve party, and she brings Lulu along. The party gets wild as midnight approaches. Ani ends up staying at his house, and when she wakes up late the next afternoon, she rushes to get ready for work. Ivan, not wanting her to leave, offers Ani $15,000 to be his girlfriend for the week, so she doesn't have to work. Tempted by the offer, Ani goes to the club and asks Jimmy for time off. Although Jimmy points out that he already gave her time off for the holiday, Ani says he doesn't pay her enough, then walks out. The next morning, Ani moves into Ivan's house. She spends another night with him and meets his friends the following day. She keeps up the act of being his girlfriend, spending the day with him and staying with him at night. Another day, they visit a candy shop where Ivan's friends, Tom and Crystal, work. They take candy and then run off to the beach to have fun. Ani enjoys a life of luxury with Ivan, even joining him and his friends on a spontaneous trip to Las Vegas. They party in Ivan's private suite, gamble at the casino, and enjoy everything Vegas has to offer. But the week is almost over, and he has to return to Russia for work, something he doesn't want to do. He jokingly suggests marrying an American so he can avoid going back home. Ivan starts to take the idea seriously, especially when he remembers people can get married quickly in Las Vegas. He asks Ani to marry him, but she laughs and refuses. He insists that they have so much fun together, and realizing he's serious, Ani agrees. They rush to the Little White Chapel and get married. Because of this, Ani quits her job as a dancer. Her co-workers congratulate her. The next day, Ivan buys a wedding ring and a new coat for Ani. They continue to enjoy their time together, appearing to become a real couple. Meanwhile, Ivan's parents learn about the marriage and call his godfather, Toro, a priest living in America. Toro orders his man, Garnik, to find Ivan. That same day, Ani notices Ivan's phone vibrating, but he ignores the calls. She asks if he's told his parents about their marriage, and Ivan says he has. Meanwhile, Garnik discovers that Ivan married a woman he paid for, and this makes it more urgent for them to bring him back to Russia. Garnik tells his partner, Igor, that they shouldn't hurt Ivan, though. The two men show up at Ivan's house, and when Ivan refuses to let them in, Garnik surprises him by unlocking the door. Ivan fights to keep them out, but Ani asks if she should call the police. Ivan insists he's fine, but as Garnik tries to open the door, he mentions that his godfather is angry about the marriage to a paid woman. This shocks Ani, and she asks Ivan what's going on. Ivan is too focused on the men to answer her, and eventually, he lets them in. He agrees to show them his marriage license to prove he legally married Ani. Ivan takes Garnik to his office to show the license, leaving Igor with Ani. Garnik sends photos of the license to Toro, who is at a baptism. Toro, upset, excuses himself from the ceremony and calls Ivan's mother to report what happened. He then takes charge of the situation and calls Garnik, asking to be put on speaker so Ani can hear. Toro scolds Ivan for marrying a woman like Ani, insulting her. He says Ivan has embarrassed his family and made his mother cry. Toro also tells Ivan that his parents are coming to America to fix the problem, and he'll take Ivan and Ani to City Hall to have the marriage annulled. Ivan falls silent, and Ani is left to defend herself and their marriage. Suddenly, Ivan realizes the seriousness of the situation. He urges Ani to come with him right away. Confused, Ani goes to gather her things, but Ivan refuses to wait and runs off alone. Garnik chases him, while Ani struggles to keep up. However, Igor blocks her path, and Garnik trips, allowing Ivan to escape. In a panic, Ani tries to fight Igor off, fearing what he might do to her. This leads to Igor tackling her to the ground. She fights back desperately, and eventually, Igor ties her up. When Garnik returns to the house, he's surprised to see the situation. Igor explains that he was ordered to keep her inside, but she kept fighting. Garnik tells Igor to release her, saying they'll handle her if she tries to escape again. Though Igor lets Ani go, she tries to run once more. He grabs her again, and in retaliation, she bites his neck. Seeing that she won't give up, Garnik agrees to tie her up again, but Ani kicks him in the face. While Garnik tends to his injury, Toro finally arrives and is shocked at the condition of the house. Worse, he discovers that Ivan managed to escape. He orders Igor to release Ani, surprised that she managed to defeat both men. Igor argues that if they untie her, she'll try to run again. Ani offers to get her phone and call Ivan, but Toro insists that Igor do it instead. As Igor calls Ivan, Ani complains about the way they invaded her home, chased Ivan, and attacked her. Toro apologizes and uses Ani's phone to call Ivan, but the call goes straight to voicemail. Toro points out that Ivan isn't a good husband since he abandoned her and isn't answering her calls. Still, Ani insists that their marriage is legal. Toro criticizes her, saying she doesn't really know Ivan. He reminds her that Ivan has caused trouble since he was a child, and now this situation is putting his family at risk. Despite this, Ani remains hopeful, and even suggests that she might already be pregnant with Ivan's child. Toro threatens that if that's true, they will handle it. He then reveals that the house doesn't belong to Ivan, and the room they've been staying in is his parents'. Ivan's actual room is a child's room full of space-themed decorations, and Toro comments that this shows Ivan's immaturity. He accuses Ivan of shaming his family with the marriage and warns Ani that if she doesn't cooperate, he will press charges for scamming Ivan into marrying her. Ani argues that it was Ivan who proposed to her and shows them the ring he gave her. Seeing this, Toro forcefully takes the ring from her, saying it belongs to Ivan's father. Desperate, Ani screams for help, hoping someone will hear and call the police. In response, Toro grabs a scarf and silences her by gagging her. Afterward, Toro speaks to Ani calmly. He paints Ivan as a spoiled troublemaker who betrayed everyone. He insists that Ivan only married her for a green card and offers to pay her $10,000 for it once they get the annulment. Torn and scared, Ani asks to speak with Ivan before making a decision. Toro agrees but tells her that after the annulment, she won't be allowed to see Ivan again. With no other option, Ani reluctantly agrees. Once she's let go, Ani washes up in the bathroom to calm down. She gets dressed and prepares to join the men in searching for Ivan. However, she's upset when Igor sits next to her in the car, refusing to be with the man who had tied her down earlier. As they drive around, Igor awkwardly apologizes for hurting her, but Ani doesn't forgive him. Their first stop is the candy shop, where Crystal and Tom say Ivan hasn't been there or contacted them. Toro takes charge and orders the couple to call Ivan. Suspicious, Crystal and Tom refuse. After a long argument, Toro orders Igor to destroy the shop. Terrified, Crystal finally calls Ivan, but it goes straight to voicemail. Annie asks if Ivan could be with another friend, so they're directed to Alex's workplace. At the restaurant, Annie asks Alex about Ivan, but he hasn't seen him either. They use Alex's phone to call Ivan, but again the call goes to voicemail. Trying another approach, Toro shows Ivan's photo to the restaurant guests, asking if anyone has seen him. When this doesn't work, they leave. On the way back to the car, Igor notices that Ani is cold and offers her the scarf they used to gag her earlier. Suspicious that he plans to use it on her again, Ani hesitates but eventually accepts the scarf to stay warm. Throughout the walk, both Toro and Igor keep a close watch on her. As they reach the car, Toro is shocked to see that it's being towed. He offers the tow truck driver money, but the driver refuses. In a fit of anger, Toro gets into his car and forcibly detaches it from the truck, frightening the driver. He orders everyone to get in, and they drive off. The group keeps searching for Ivan at different places, but they don't have any luck. As the night goes on, Garnick, still suffering from the headache caused by Ani's kick, gets sick in the car, forcing Toro to clean it up. The smell lingers, making the ride unpleasant. They eventually find out that Ivan had been at a club but left already. Realizing he's been partying, they check other clubs to find him. Meanwhile, Ivan has just arrived at the club where Ani used to work. Diamond is thrilled and announces his arrival to the other dancers, preparing to approach him. Lulu, worried, notices this. The group then sits down for dinner, and Toro grows increasingly anxious about not being able to find Ivan. During this time, Ani receives a message from Lulu telling her where Ivan is. They quickly head to the club, arriving just as Diamond convinces Ivan to join her in the VIP room. At the club, Annie immediately confronts Diamond, angry that she's trying to entertain her husband. Toro scolds Ivan, while Annie pleads with him for an explanation. She reminds him how he ran off, leaving her to be attacked and her ring taken. Ani, still wanting to save her marriage, begs Ivan to stop the annulment, but he's too drunk to listen. Frustrated, Toro drags Ivan out of the club and Ani continues to plead with her husband. Diamond mocks Ani, claiming she was right about the marriage. Furious, Ani punches her, starting a fight that only ends when Igor drags Ani away. Back in the car, Ani argues with Toro, saying she needs to speak to Ivan when he's sober because he's in no state to make any decisions. Toro insists on proceeding with the annulment and takes them to City Hall, where they wait for the judge. Ani tries to speak to Ivan, but he's still disoriented. Despite her protests, the annulment process continues. Ani argues their Las Vegas marriage is legal, but the judge dismisses the case. Toro forces them to meet Ivan's parents. At the airport, Ani tries to impress them, but Galina shuts her down. When Ivan's parents push for the annulment in Nevada, Ani pleads with Ivan to stop, but he refuses, confirming their divorce. He thanks her for making his trip fun, which makes Ani realize she was just entertainment. On the plane, Ani insists on hiring a lawyer to get her share of Ivan's money, but Galina threatens her. In Las Vegas, Ivan refuses to defend Ani, so she signs the annulment papers. Igor suggests Ivan apologize, but Galina dismisses it. Ani calls Ivan a coward and leaves, throwing her scarf at Galina and her coat at Ivan. Toro takes Ani to the car and orders Igor to take her to the airport, allowing her to stay at the family's house for the night. On the flight back, Ani sleeps while Igor covers her with his jacket. At the house, Ani cries and smokes with Igor. He comments that her real name is nicer than her nickname, and they talk about how it's better she didn't join Ivan's family. Ani dismisses his compliment, still feeling distrustful of him. In the morning, she packs up and Igor takes her to the bank to confirm payment before heading home. He returns her wedding ring, and Ani realizes Igor might actually be on her side. Realizing Igor cared more for her than Ivan ever did, and the fairy tale life is over.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay connected with us.